Maku ko e haere kinga haeringa. Ki te tonga ponga wai tapu a te kōpua mata mata kamo kamo. Me te kōpua mata kerepo e ho ma. Ko ene nai wai tapu a te mata aho nana I whakairo. E whenua mai anō e titiro atu. Ki te katia kiki nai hurua taiki.
The Māori and Polynesian influence in the game of rugby, not in New Zealand but worldwide, is huge, and I think it's a game that really suits their natural skills and ability. It's something they really take to. They love the physical contact. It's something that becomes natural to them.
I think there's a stereotype that Māori and Pacific are warrior people, but if you think about the British who came to New Zealand to colonise it, they could also be equally conceptualised as a warrior people, because they were going out all over the world attempting to dominate other cultures. So I think that stereotype we need to set aside. What we do know from research that's been done is that Māori took to rugby in large part because it was one activity that was available to them. So the missionaries and the early colonisers in many ways squashed some of the Indigenous games and activities that people were involved in, but rugby and sport provided a way for Māori to retain their tribal identities, their regional identities, and continue to compete, but in a way that didn't look like it was doing that.
If you look at the history of the All Blacks, right back through 100 years, it is absolutely entwined with different cultures playing in that team. We even have a New Zealand Māori team, which dates back, to the same period, 100 and something years. You can't have one without the other. And I don't think that any New Zealand rugby fan would even be happy at the fact that there would be one without the other.
I think rugby became important to New Zealand for a lot of different reasons, and not the least of which was it was one of the few places in which we could kind of place our mark on the world stage. And so the early development of rugby was a way for us to show the mother country that we were equal, if not better, than the men in the home nation. So the success of the early All Blacks team certainly perhaps planted the first stake in the ground about this was a sport around which we might be able to develop a sense of what a New Zealand identity would be. The Invincibles tour in the early 1900s was a huge moment. It was one of the first places around which this sort of emergent national identity could develop. So I think that tour was really important in terms of New Zealand nationalism as a whole. It could have been something else, but it was rugby. So that started rugby becoming a point around which we could feel that we were New Zealanders as opposed to British citizens living in New Zealand.
It is part of the fabric of our world, of our society, of our life. I think generationally it always has been, and I think it's because it's one of those things that if you go to Australia, you'll find that kids run around playing cricket, knocking a cricket ball. If you go to England, they'll be kicking a football. If you come to New Zealand, kids in the backyard and on the beach throw a rugby ball around.
I don't think there's many people in New Zealand who haven't been exposed to rugby. And certainly if you grew up in the country, that the rugby club and the rugby club rooms were usually the centre of the community.
It's not just about the guys, it's a thing that covers both sexes, so it's your whole sort of socio groups that are into rugby. Mums make the decision about which sports their sons play a lot of the time, and so if they're into rugby, then that's going to be more young kids playing rugby.
You also can't deny that, as a kid, if you're out in the backyard and you've got a rugby ball and you're thinking you're Aaron Smith or Bodie Barrett or DJ Forbes or whoever it might be, doesn't have a bit of an influence on it. So we've got great role models, got great players for these kids to aspire to be. But if it's not fun and enjoyable when they're 8, 9 or 10, doesn't matter how good these guys are, they won't play down there.
If we go back a long time, rugby was almost part of the school curriculum. It was accessibility, almost an expectation. I know at the school, there was an expectation to play rugby. They played a lot of sports here, a big part of the ethos of the school, but the rugby just probably sat on top of that. And then with great first 15 competition, no doubt about that. Parents and teachers coaching, people wanting to be involved in the game. Mums who probably know more about the game than a lot of the men, you know. It's just what we're brought up with. It's infused, so it's almost, I wouldn't call it a religion, but I'd actually call it a lifestyle. It's inherently part of our lifestyle.
High school is really important in New Zealand. The college system, especially in the big cities, it's now really about recruiting players and about offering them scholarships and about taking them into other aspects of their education and life. It's enormous. The First 15 thing in New Zealand now is just growing and growing, especially that it is live on TV. When I was at school, even back then, the First 15 was, considered the upper echelon of the school. Most of them got their UE accredited. Most of them had tickets to ride and all kinds of other aspects of the school. So, yeah, it plays a huge part.
Then you go to structured competitions. We've had strong club rugby competitions, strong provincial competitions. Then along came Super Rugby that added another layer, professionalised the game, and then you go to an international level. And then you make sure at all those levels you got leadership right, because if you haven't got the leadership right, you're not going to get anything right. And I think New Zealand rugby, for all its history, with rare exceptions, has been incredibly well led. And we've got a talent pool here. We're very lucky. We've got a deep talent pool, because it's playing for the All Blacks is something that rugby players aspire to here.
We're expecting an uplift in popularity for the game in the Sevens game coming off the back of the Olympics, and having Ripper Rugby and Quick Rip in the secondary school environment will be a big part of the options that we can put in front of kids to start to get involved in the game, that ultimately might end up with them, playing at an Olympic Games sometime in the future.
Sport doesn't necessarily have an impact on economies or social or whatever, but actually it does, because it can inspire somebody out of a certain socio-economic group. It gives you an opportunity. It can have an impact on health. These fit rugby players, other kids want to be like that, they do exercise, and obviously it's a great export for our country. So New Zealand is interlaced with the success of the All Blacks, so they better keep winning.
Takes more than one to tackle him, takes more than two, it takes more than three. Gossing was in the end who took them over the line. Kenny Brazier there with a long pass off the right hand. McAllister had the option.
We'd often talk about the legacy of the team, and the legacy is about its history, and those who've gone before, who've built this up, have proudly worn it. Then it's someone else's turn, then someone else's turn again. So you're only passing through the jersey, and all you want to do is leave it better than you found it, if you possibly can, try and enhance the legacy. So that's what drives these guys. They know it's not permanent. Yeah, once an All Black and always an All Black, and you will have that title, I suppose, in New Zealand for the rest of your days. But enhancing the legacy is critically important.
And the mystique around the All Blacks is all about why they win and how they win, and that just winning breeds success, and it's a habit. And I think if you're winning, everyone's trying to knock you off, but to still be standing here for this long and still be the benchmark after so many decades is a testament to the guys that have set the platform in the All Blacks jerseys, and a big pat on the back for the guys that are still coming in there and adding their legacy to their jersey.